Hello there, this video will cover how to install Linux on PCs and laptops by using a Debian Live USB stick created on an Android device. If you are interested in Linux on an Android, then you may be interested in my playlist that will cover how to install and set up a Linux desktop on an Android without rooting. There will be commands, further information, and updates in the pinned comment for this video. First, I am going to cover the overall install procedure. Following the process that I will show for installing Linux will never leave you without a working system, so whatever system you do have will not be affected at any point during this install process. Also, installing Linux is a long process, so with that being said, take your time. Now for the overall install process, we first download a live ISO image. Then with the ISO file and a USB stick, we create a Debian Live USB stick that we can boot from. After that, we will change the boot order on the computer so that the computer will boot from the Debian Live USB stick. Then we will use the Debian Live USB stick to install Debian onto an SD card, and finally we will do some fixes and configurations. The hardware required for this process is a USB stick with a minimum of 8 gigs, an SD or micro SD card. I recommend 128 gigs, but it can be smaller or larger. Finally, we will also need a USB to SD or micro SD card adapter. Keep in mind that Linux can be run from an SD card for as long as you want, and you never have to run Linux from a hard drive or SSD if you don't want to. If your end goal is to install and run Linux from a hard drive or SSD, then it is still a good practice to install Linux onto an SD card first, because we can try out and test Linux before committing to it, work out any fixes, and this also guarantees that you will always have a working system. In other words, installing Linux on an SD card is like a practice run, which makes installing Linux on a hard drive or SSD easier. Now we can start with the first step, which is downloading the ISO image. Before we download the ISO image, we will check to see if the EtchDroid app is available from the Play Store. If it is available from the Play Store, then we will download the ISO from the Android side. If the EtchDroid app is not available from the Play Store, then we will download the ISO from the Userland Linux side. First, I will cover the normal method for downloading a live ISO. Do not do this as of July 30th, 2024, the version 12.6.0 will fail to install Linux. So I will show the normal download method, and then I will show a workaround to ensure the install will work. Only Debian and Calamaris knows how version 12.6.0 passed quality assurance and made it into publication. To download the Debian Live ISO, we need to go to the official Debian website, which is debian.org. From there, on the right side, under the big download button, we can click on Other Downloads. After that, on the right side, we can click on Try Debian Live before installing. Then from here, we can click on either of the AMD64 links for whichever download you prefer. If you have trouble with the download that uses BitTorrent, then you can use the other download. Finally, we can scroll down to the list of live images and click on the Debian-live file that ends in lxde.iso. This will download the ISO file, which is about 3 gigs. For future reference, if you are looking for other desktops, they are in this list. Note that my videos will be focusing on the LXDE desktop. Depending on the time of the download, the version may vary from what is shown here. Now the live ISO allows us to try Debian Linux before installing it, and it also gives us a more streamlined install procedure. If you use 12.6.0 to install Linux, you will likely get an error at 68% that says it failed to finish a command in 600 seconds. This type of error has been previously reported. Here is one example. The good news is Debian Best Practices includes archiving earlier versions. To download an earlier version, we can go to cdimage.debian.org/mirror/cdimage/archive. I will have this link in the pinned comment. From here, we can scroll down until we see the version 12.2.0-live. Now I am recommending 12.2.0, which is the version I am using. Troubleshooting 12.6.0 was very time-consuming and would require Debian developer skills that are above my pay grade. Later in this video, I will demonstrate how to do a dist upgrade and a kernel update. After clicking on 12.2.0-live, we can click on AMD 64, and then click on ISO-hybrid. From here, we can scroll down the list of live images and click on the file that starts with Debian-live and ends with lxde.iso. This will start downloading the earlier version, which again will be about 3 gigs. We have now finished the first step for installing Linux. Next, we are going to create the Debian Live USB stick. So computers can boot from either an ISO or FAT32. The EdgeDroid app will create an ISO, while the generic method will use FAT32. For the method that uses the EdgeDroid app, we first need to install the EdgeDroid app from the Play Store. After the EdgeDroid app is installed, we need to first check that notifications are enabled for the EdgeDroid app, otherwise we won't be able to monitor the progress when we use EdgeDroid to create the Debian Live USB stick. To do that, we can go to Android Settings, scroll down and click on Apps, then click on See All Apps, scroll down to EdgeDroid and click on it, then click on Notifications, and finally enable all EdgeDroid notifications if they are not already enabled. Once we have enabled notifications for the EdgeDroid app, we can then go ahead and plug our USB stick into our Android device. After that, we can open the EdgeDroid app. From here, we can click on the Write Raw Image or ISO option. Then we can navigate to the live ISO file that we downloaded earlier and select it. After that, we can select the USB stick. Then click on the OK button to allow EdgeDroid to access the USB stick. Once we've done that, we can click on the button on the bottom right, and then click on Flash Image to create the Debian Live USB stick. Note that this will erase anything that is on the USB stick. Then to check the progress, we can simply pull down our notifications. Note that it may take a moment or two for the notification to show. When EdgeDroid is done with creating the Debian Live USB stick, we can then swipe out the Write Finished notification, and then unplug the USB stick from our device. So now we have created a Debian Live USB stick. If we were not able to use the EdgeDroid app, then we can use a generic method with Linux inside the Userland app. If you are not familiar with the Userland app, then you can watch my Linux on Android without rooting playlist. For the generic method, we need the USB stick to be formatted as FAT32. To do that, we can plug the USB stick into our device, and then we can go to Android Settings, scroll down and click on Storage, and then click on the This Device pull-down and select the USB stick. After that, we can click on the 3-dot menu in the top right, select Format, then click on the Format button in the bottom right, and finally click on the Format button to confirm that we want to erase and format the USB stick. From here we can wait a few moments for the USB stick to be formatted. Once the USB stick is formatted, we can click on the Done button in the bottom right. Now from Linux inside the Userland app, we can open up a terminal, and then we can navigate into the folder that has the .iso file that we downloaded earlier. For my example, the .iso file is in my Downloads folder, so I'm going to do cd space downloads to navigate into the Downloads folder. From here we can also do ls to list the files and folders in the current directory. After that, we can do 7z space x space the name of the .iso file, and instead of typing out the whole name of the file, we can just highlight the name of the file, do Ctrl-Shift-C to copy the name, and then do Ctrl-Shift-V to paste it. Then after that, we can do space-o/downloads, starting with a capital D/hold. Now we can think of the .iso file as a quirky .zip file. So what we're doing is we're using the 7z tool to extract all of the files from the .iso file, and we're putting all those files in the /downloads/hold file path. When 7z is done with extracting all of the files, we can then go to the Files app on the Android side, then go into internal storage, and then go into the download folder. And finally, we can go into the hold folder that we just created, where we can see all of the extracted files. Now we can copy all of the files to the USB stick. Since we would likely get an error if we copied everything all at once, we will instead copy each folder individually. To do that, we can click on the three-dot menu button that is to the right of each of the files, select Copy To, then select the USB stick, and click on the Copy Here button. We will repeat this process for the rest of the folders. Once we get to the last 5 individual files, we can select all of them, click on the three-dot menu in the top right corner, select Copy To, select the USB stick, and then click on the Copy Here button. Note that any folders that are auto-generated by Android on the USB stick will not affect the functionality of the Debian Live USB stick. Lastly, we are going to copy the splash images so that they are in the right folder. If we don't copy over the splash images into the right folder, then when we start up from the Debian Live USB stick, we will get a file boot/grub/splash.png not found. The splash image is just a decorative background that's used in the startup, so it's not critical for the Live USB to run. So if we copy these splash images into the wrong folder, or we don't copy the images at all, then we would just press any key to continue and move on. So from the USB files, we will copy the splash images from the /iso Linux folder and paste them into the /boot/grub file path. Now from the Files app, we can go into the USB stick, then scroll down and go into the ISO Linux folder, and then scroll down again until we see the splash images. Here we can select both of the splash images, then click on the three-dot menu button in the top right, select Copy To, select the USB stick, and then scroll down and go into the boot folder, and then go into the grub folder, and click on Copy Here. We are now done with creating the Debian Live USB stick, so we can eject the USB stick by pulling down our notifications, and click on the eject button. We are another step closer to installing Linux. Now, on to changing the boot order. So we can do this one of 2 ways. First, we can temporarily change the boot order, which means we can select what to boot from every time, and we can do this for as long as we want. Alternatively, if you are comfortable enough, we can permanently change the boot order, which will change the order of what the PC or laptop boots from. In order to do that, we need to press a specific key or keys before the computer completely starts up. Keep in mind that the keys will vary for every system. So a common place that we can find the key or keys we need to press are with a screen that pops up before the computer starts up. For example, when I start up my Beelink Mini S12 Pro, I get a screen that pops up that tells me the keys that I can press to change the boot order. Another place that we can look is anywhere on our PC or laptop. So again, on my Beelink Mini S12 Pro, written on the bottom are the keys that I can press to change the boot order. Lastly, we can search for the manufacturer, model, and then end it with boot order and start looking from there. Like with the keys that will vary system by system, the screens for choosing what to boot from and changing the boot order will also vary system by system. So again, I will be using the Beelink Mini S12 Pro as an example. When we are ready, we can plug the Debian Live USB stick into our PC or laptop and start up the computer. Before the computer starts up, I am repeatedly pressing F7. This will take me to a list of options that I can boot from temporarily. So I'm going to make sure the USB stick is selected and press enter. From here, we should all see a grub boot menu where Live AMD 64 should be selected. When we are ready, we can press enter and Linux will start up. Note that it will take a few moments since we are running a live system. We can also ignore any messages that we see. And if we get a black screen or a black screen with a mouse, that's okay. We just need to wait a little longer for Linux to completely start up. The cool thing about live systems is that we can try out and test Linux before installing it. So if you would like, you can try out Linux before we go ahead and install it onto an SD card. Now I am going to show an example of permanently changing the boot order. So when I start up my computer, I'm going to repeatedly press the delete key this time, and this will take me to the setup screen. From here, I'm going to go over to the boot tab. Before editing anything, take a picture with your phone so that way we have something to go back to in case we need it. Here, I have already changed the boot order to boot from USB first so that the computer will start up from the Debian Live USB stick. Now that I am finished with changing the boot order, I am going to go over to the Save and Exit tab, and I'm going to press Enter to save my changes and exit, and then I'm going to press Enter again to confirm my changes. After changing the boot order, we should again see the Grub Boot menu. And again, like last time, we should have Live System AMD 64 selected, press Enter, and then give Linux a few moments to start up. We are now done with changing the boot order, so we can move on to installing Debian onto an SD card. Before we install Linux onto an SD card, we will disable the screensaver because it can affect the install. To do that, we will go to the menu in the bottom left corner, and under Preferences, we will click on X Screensaver Settings. Then in the window that comes up, we will click on the Mode pull-down and select Disable Screensaver. After that, we can close out of the X Screensaver settings. Now we can plug the SD card into our computer. For my example, I am using an SD card plugged into a USB to micro SD card adapter. For any window that comes up, we can click on the OK button and close out of any file manager windows. Then, when we are ready, we can double-click on the Install Debian icon that is on the desktop and wait a moment or two for the installer window to come up. From here, we can select our language and click on the Next button. And then we can select our region and zone and click on the Next button again. After that, we can select our keyboard layout and then click on the Next button. For this next step, we are going to click on the Select Storage Device pull-down and select the SD card. Be sure to select the SD card and not your main system, otherwise the install will wipe out your main system. After selecting the SD card, we are going to select Manual Partitioning and then click on the Next button. Since we are using an SD card, there are a couple of things that we can do to prevent the SD card from wear and tear. First, as we are setting up the install, we are not going to create a swap partition, and then after we have installed Linux onto an SD card, we will set it up so that any TMP and log files are sent to RAM, and then we will also disable journaling. Now, back to manual partitioning. So first, we are going to click on the New Partition Table button and make sure the GPT option is selected for the type of partition table, and then click on the OK button. After that, we are going to select the free space and click on the Create button. Then in the window that comes up, we will set the size to 500. And then in the File System pull-down, we will select FAT32. Next, we will click on the Mount pull-down and select /boot/EFI. And after that, for the FS label, we can type in boot. And finally, under flags, we can check the boot flag. When we are done setting that all up, we can click on the OK button. After that, we are going to create one more partition, so we are again going to select the free space and click on the Create button. This time, we are not going to change the size, so we are going to leave the rest of the free space to this partition. For the file system, we will make sure that extent 4 is selected, and then for the mount point, we will select slash. Slash is often referred to as the root directory. After that, for the FS label, we will type in main, and then we are not going to check any flags. Again, when we are done with creating this partition, we can click on the OK button. In summary, computers first boot from the UEFI FAT32 partition. When the UEFI has completed its initialization, it hands off control to the operating system. The operating system, which is Linux in this case, is what will be on the extent 4 partition. Now that we are done with creating the partitions, we can click on the Next button. And here is where we can enter in the names we would like to use as well as a password. We will also check the box to log in automatically without asking for the password. Once we have set that all up, we can click on the Next button where we will be taken to the summary. Now this is the last chance to check that Linux is being installed on the SD card and not the main system. When we are satisfied with everything, we can click on the Install button and now Linux will install onto the SD card. Depending on the computer and the chips we are using, the install time may vary. When the install is done, we can uncheck Restart Now and then click on the Done button. And now we have successfully installed Debian onto an SD card. All we have left to do now are some fixes and configurations. The first thing we are going to do is set it up so that any TMP and log files are sent to RAM. This will prevent wear and tear on the SD card. To do that, we are first going to unplug the SD card from our computer, plug the SD card back into the computer, click on the OK button, and close out of the File Manager window. Then we will go to the menu, select Run, and we are going to execute the command sudo space pcman-fm. This will run the file manager with root. Here I am just maximizing the window. Now we are going to go up to Directories, go into the Media folder, then go into the User folder, go into the Main folder, and finally, we will go into the ETC folder. From here, we are going to right-click on a file called fstab and open it with mousepad. Before we edit this file, we are going to save a copy of it by going to the File menu, select Save As, and then save the file as fstab.bak so that way we have something to go back to in case we need it. When we are done with that, we can click on the Save button, then close out of mousepad, and open up the original file again by right-clicking on the fstab file, and open it with mousepad. Now we are going to add 3 lines to the end of this file. So for the first line, we will put in tmpfs, and space over to the next column. Note that the spaces are just for readability. Then for the second column, we will type in /var/log, space over to the third column, put in tmpfs, then space over to the last column, and type in defaults, no time, space 0, space 0. Then for the next line, we will type in tmpfs, space over to the second column, and put in /var/tmp, space over to the third column, type in tmpfs, space over to the final column, and put in defaults, no time, space 0, space 0. And for the last line, we will put in tmpfs, space over again, and put in /tmp, space over to the third column and put in tmpfs, and then space over to the last column and put in, you guessed it, defaults, comma, no time, space 0, space 0. Then, out of good practice, we are going to press enter one more time. Now that we are done with editing the fstab file, we can go to the File menu, click on Save, and then close out of Mousepad as well as the File Manager. Next, we are going to disable journaling, which will also help prevent wear and tear on the SD card. To do that, we are going to open up a terminal, which we can do by going to the menu, and under System Tools, we can open up LX Terminal. Then from the window that comes up, we can make it full screen, and to make the text bigger, we can do Ctrl-Shift+ on our keyboard. We can also make the text smaller by doing Ctrl-Shift-. Before we disable journaling, we need to unmount the SD card. To do that, we will first execute sudo space su. This will switch us to the root user. After that, we will do df space -h to list all of the mounted file systems. So the SD card will be the last thing that was plugged in. For my example, the SD card is /dev/sdb2. So the SD card will be /dev/sd followed by the highest letter. The SD card should also have /media/user/main as the mount point. Once we have figured out which file system is our SD card, we can then unmount the SD card by doing umount space /dev/sd followed by whatever letters and numbers are your SD card. After that, we can do debug fs space -R space in lowercase letters features space /dev/sd followed by the letters and numbers that are your SD card. This will list all of the file system features where we can see that journaling is enabled. To disable journaling, we can do tune to fs space -O space caret and in lowercase letters has_journal space /dev/sd followed by the letters and numbers that are your SD card. Note that if you wanted to enable journaling, then you would execute the same command except without the caret. Once we have done that, we can press the up arrow key twice to get the command that listed all of the file system features, and this time when we execute it, we can see that journaling has been disabled. Now that we have disabled journaling, we can go ahead and close out of the terminal. Next, we are going to fix any issues with the SD card not booting up. To do that, we are going to copy all of the files from the /EFI/Debian file path to the /EFI/boot file path. Then from the /EFI/boot file path, we will rename the grubx64.efi file to bootx64.efi. Then finally, we will copy the grubx64.efi file from the /EFI/Debian file path and paste it into the /EFI/boot file path. In order to access those files on the SD card, we need to disable the boot flag on the SD card. To do that, we will use gparted. To install gparted, we first need to go online by going to the menu, and under Preferences, we can click on Conman Settings. Then we can click on the Conman icon that pops up in the bottom right of the taskbar. Here we can use the wired option to connect to Ethernet, or we can use our Android device to do USB tethering instead. Also, if you have a wireless option, then you can use Wi-Fi as well. If you can't do a wired connection and don't have a wireless option, then you can try plugging in a Wi-Fi dongle and see if that gives a wireless option for internet. To use USB tethering from our Android device, we need the wired option enabled from Conman Settings, and then we need to connect the Android to the computer with a USB cord. Then on the Android device from Android Settings, we can click on Connected Devices, then click on USB, and under Use USB 4, we can select USB tethering and make sure the phone is also online. Now from the PC or laptop, we should see that we are connected to the internet. Note that we can ignore any error window that pops up and click on the OK button. Now that we are online, we can go ahead and close out of Conman Settings. And then to install Gparted, we can use a terminal, which again we can open up from the menu. And under System Tools, we can click on LX Terminal. Then from here, we will first execute sudo space apt space update space -y. This will update the software index list. When that's done, we can do sudo space apt space install space gparted space -y. This will install Gparted. Note that Gparted will only be temporarily installed and it will be gone by the time we shut down the Debian Live USB stick. In a later video, I will show how to use persistence, which will keep changes we make to a live USB stick, which can then be used as both a portable and backup system. When Gparted is done installing, we can close out of the terminal, and then from the menu, in the System Tools category, we can click on Gparted. When Gparted is open, we can make it full screen, and then we can click on the drop-down in the top right, and select the SD card. The SD card will have the FAT32 and Extent4 partitions that we made earlier when we were installing Linux onto the SD card. From here, we can right-click on the FAT32 boot partition, select Manage Flags, and then uncheck the boot flag. Note that this will automatically check the MSFT data flag. After that, we can click on the Close button and close out of Gparted. Now we can access the files that I mentioned earlier and fix any issue with booting up from the SD card. To do that, we can unplug the SD card from our computer and then plug the SD card back in. And then for both windows that come up, we can click on the OK button. Then from here, we can close out of the window that has a bunch of folders in it, and then maximize the window that has only the EFI folder. From here, we can go into the EFI folder, then go into the Debian folder, do Ctrl-A to select all of the files, then do Ctrl-C to copy all of the files, then we can go up a directory, go into the boot folder, and then do Ctrl-V to paste all of the files. After that, we are going to right-click on the grubx64.efi file, select Rename, and rename the file to be, in all capital letters, boot, and then in lowercase letters, x64.efi. When we're done renaming it, we can click on the OK button. Finally, we can go up a directory, then go into the Debian folder, select the grubx64.efi file and do Ctrl-C to copy it, then go up a directory one more time, go into the boot folder, and do Ctrl-V to paste the grubx64.efi file. Now that we are done with that, we need to enable the boot flag again so we can close out of the file manager, and then we can open up Gparted again from the menu, and in System Tools, we can click on Gparted. After that, we can again click on the drop-down on the top right, select the SD card, then right-click the FAT32 boot partition, select Manage Flags, and check the boot flag. Note that the ESP flag will also automatically be checked. When we are done doing that, we can click on the Close button, and then close out of Gparted. We can now also shut down Linux by going to the menu, select Logout, and then click on Shut Down and wait a few moments for Linux to shut down. When Linux has shut down, we can unplug the Debian Live USB stick from the computer and leave the SD card plugged in. And the moment we've been waiting for, we can start up our computer, which will boot from the SD card and run Linux. Note that if you temporarily chose what to boot from last time, then you will need to again select what to boot from, which for this instance is the SD card. When Linux starts up, we won't have to select anything, so we can just wait a moment or two for it to start up. We can also generally ignore any messages that we see. And ta-da! we have Linux running from an SD card. If we have new hardware, then we may need to update in order for everything to work properly. For example, on my Beelink Mini S12 Pro, if I go to the menu, and then go to Preferences and open up Conman Settings, and then click on the icon that pops up in the bottom right of the taskbar, we can see that I have no wireless option. Now, in order to update, we need to be online. For internet, we can use a wired connection like Ethernet or USB tethering with Android, and if you do have a wireless option, then you can use Wi-Fi as well. Again, if you can't use a wired connection and don't have a wireless option, then you can try using a Wi-Fi dongle and see if that gives a wireless option in Conman Settings. When we're online, we can close out of Conman Settings and then open up a terminal from the menu, and in the System Tools category, we can click on LX Terminal. Then from here, we will first execute sudo space apt space update space -y. This will update the software index list. Now this time, when we use sudo, we need to enter in the password that we created when we first installed Linux onto the SD card. Note that you won't be able to see the password as you are typing it. If you forget your password, then I will have a workaround written in the pinned comment, and I will also make a future video for that as well. After entering in the password, we can press enter and the command will execute. After the software index list has updated, we can do sudo space apt space dist-upgrade space -y. This will upgrade already installed packages. When that's all done, we can close out of the terminal, and then we can reboot by going to the menu, select Logout, and then click on Reboot. So now we can just wait a couple of moments for Linux to reboot. When Linux has booted back up, we can check to see if what wasn't working before is working now. So I am going to open up Conman Settings again, and we can see that I still do not have a wireless option. If something still isn't working, then we can try doing a kernel update. To do that, we need to go online, so we can use whichever method works for us, whether it's a wired or wireless option, and then we can open up a terminal. Once we have started up a terminal, we can do uname space -r. This will tell us the version of the kernel we are using. Now that we know the version of the kernel we are using, we can do apt-cache space search space linux-image space pipe space grep space double quote, and then in all capital letters PC, and then in lowercase letters s space left parenthesis signed right parenthesis double quote. This will list all of the kernel updates that we can do. Currently, the latest version is 6.9, so I'm going to install that version. To do that, we are going to do sudo space apt space install space, and instead of typing in the whole name of the update, we can highlight the name of the update, do Ctrl-Shift-C to copy it, and then do Ctrl-Shift-V to paste it. And before we are able to execute the command, we will again need to type in the password we created earlier. Once we've done that, the kernel will update. After the kernel has updated, we can do uname space -r again, and we can see that the version has not changed because in order for the changes to apply, we need to reboot. So we can close out of the terminal, and then from the menu, we can select Log Out and click on Reboot. When the computer has rebooted, we can open up a terminal again and execute the command uname space -r once more, where we can see that the kernel has successfully updated to the version we chose. After confirming that we updated the kernel, we can close out of the terminal and we can check again to see if everything is working, and this time, when I open up Conman Settings, I now have a wireless option. Finally, I am going to cover configuring resolution and audio. If you experience any issues with making an application full screen, then you may need to adjust the resolution of the application to match the resolution shown in display settings. The resolution in display settings can be viewed from the menu, and under Preferences, we can select Monitor Settings, and from there we can see the display resolution. Generally, it is best to adjust the resolution of an application as opposed to the resolution in display settings. However, if the resolution of an application cannot be changed, then we can change the resolution for the display instead. Finally, if you experience no sound, we can fix that by going to the bottom right of the taskbar and right-click the volume control, select Launch Mixer, and in the window that comes up, we can click the right arrow near the top right until we get to the Configuration tab. After that, we can click the Profile pull-down and select the output that works for your specific device and setup. For my example, I will be selecting the Digital Stereo HDMI output option. If needed, you can select each option and test them until you find the one that works for your device. Once we have sound working, we can close out of the volume control. Now, if you experience a loss of sound after making an application full screen, such as a game, that's okay. We can fix that by restarting the sound server and then choose a new profile option in the volume control. So for example, if I'm playing a game and make it full screen and suddenly I have no audio, then we can first take the app out of full screen, close the app, and then from a terminal we can restart the sound server by executing systemctl space -- user space restart space pulse audio. After restarting the sound server, we can choose a different sound profile by going to the menu, and in the sound and video category, we can select Pulse Audio Volume Control. From here, we can go to the Configuration tab where we can select a different profile option. These steps can be repeated as many times as needed until you find a profile that works for your device. Note that a quick way we can test sound from a terminal is by installing ALSA-utils and then execute speaker-test. And we have finished the final step. Congratulations, you have successfully installed Linux onto an SD card, and that was a lot of work. If you're interested in more videos for Linux on PCs and laptops, then you may be interested in my playlist that will cover more fixes, configurations, and software for Linux on PCs and laptops. If you enjoyed this video, then you may be interested in the companion books to this video, Linux on Android phones and tablets, and installing Linux on PCs and laptops. And other than that, see you soon!